My character almost died during the creation of this video, and me? Well, I died a little bit inside as well. Welcome to another episode of my Project Zomboid Masterclass, and today we are diving into the incredibly frustrating, overly complex, and painfully over-engineered world of metalworking. Okay, that might have been a little bit too dramatic, but to be honest, guys, this was probably the most painful experience I've had ever since I started this series, and this is probably going to be a long video, so bear with me. And as always, let's start with the definition. So metalworking is a skill that was specifically put in place to make the player more frustrated and to have some of them lose their mind at some point. And while that should be the definition on Project Zomboid Wikipedia, it actually says that it is a crafting skill based around forging metal objects. The main focus is around the idea of manipulating metal to provide players with new or improvised items. To begin your metalworking journey, you will need to start by setting up your workshop. And by workshop, I mean you will need to build several specific structures needed to actually practice metalworking skill. The absolute must-haves are the blacksmith's forge and a furnace. That's where most of the metalworking and smelting takes place. But also, you would want to have a grindstone where you can sharpen blades or axes. So I'm going to start with the grindstone as it ties in nicely to the previous episode I have recorded, which was about masonry. You're not able to build these things if you do not skill up masonry first. So if you haven't seen that episode, make sure to check it out. And it looks kind of cool, so it's definitely nice to have. Okay, so now let's talk about the furnace. Now, the furnace is a structure in which most of raw material preparation takes place. It's basically used to reforge and smelt various different tools or pieces of metal into different pieces of metal, which you will use to make tools or weapons. I will explain the entire process later on. Now, there are few variations to both the forge and the furnace, some of them much less complex in terms of items needed. I went with the absolute most complex versions of them because why not? And the furnace is actually the first thing you need to build because it allows you to forge an anvil, and you are not able to build a forge without having a blacksmith's anvil. So it's kind of the first thing you want to go for. Now, forging the anvil in itself is a few steps process. First, you need to build a wooden frame, which will be used to make a clay mold for the anvil. So again, you're not going to be able to do that without pottery. So once you have the clay mold shaped, you then need to use the kiln to strengthen it. And only once having that, you can use your furnace to actually smelt the blacksmith's anvil. So again, all these skills are interconnected. Pottery is again essential if you want to build your own blacksmith's workshop. And one thing that I probably should have mentioned a bit earlier is that you will want to have a charcoal pile because that's the easiest and most efficient way of creating fuel for your furnace and your forge. Now, metalworking uses up a lot of fuel, and charcoal is the most efficient one that you can craft simply by burning logs. So yeah, charcoal pile should be your friend, one of your biggest friends actually, if you're into metalworking. So I've mentioned earlier that I went for the most complex setup available and went for the advanced forge, which requires an anvil, large bellows, and a bunch of different things. And here I actually encountered what I think is a bug, as the game did not recognize large bellows when I placed them on the ground. So I shamelessly spawned one into my inventory using debug modes, and no regrets, guys. Building large bellows on its own is a tedious process of actually making your own medium leather. So I did not want to go through that thing more than once. And obviously you do not need to go through this entire process and go with the simple solution of, say, just building a simple forge. But I'm not gonna lie, I like the look of the advanced forge, and my entire backyard was designed to fit it. So I just had to go for the full option, right? Pretty badass, to be honest. So congratulations, guys. We've got our workshop set up. Perfect. That's step one in our metalworking journey. Now let's talk a little bit about the resources which are being used in the process of making items. That's where I actually started to question my entire existence. That's because an iron bar is different than an iron rod, even though they're both made out of iron and they both look exactly the same. But hey, one of these can be used in all your metalworking activities and one cannot. And that's just the beginning. Not to mention everything else. Things like iron rod halves, steel pieces, iron chunks, iron blocks, steel rods, iron pipes, iron ingots. Guys, this is as complex as Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I have no idea why. So just equip yourself with a lot of patience. Now, at first, I wanted to just craft whatever I was able to craft with the materials that I've had as I was collecting some resources prior to making this tutorial, but I found it to be incredibly inefficient, time-consuming and tedious. I eventually managed, obviously, to hit level 1, but it took me so long that I needed to reorganize my entire strategy, and I started to ask myself the question, what's going to give me the largest amount of XP per single craft? And it turns out that at every single level, there is a specific item which is most efficient to craft, and if you apply the skill book bonus, it's actually not that time-consuming. Once you, let's say, crack the code, it's not as bad, but it's still not a pleasant experience. I mean, if we compare that to leveling masonry or pottery, not even close. But yeah, the thing I went for going for level 2 was forging forks. Now, you're probably going to ask yourself a question, what I'm going to do with 20 forks and 20 spoons? I'm all alone here anyway. And that's a valid question, and the good thing is that you can actually use your furnace and smelt these things into iron chunks, which basically can be used to recraft them into different materials and later on different tools. You just need to be careful because I accidentally smelted some of my tools and I needed to head back to the warehouse to find spare ones, so don't make my mistakes. And the way to avoid that is simply deselecting the default item. In this case it was a mason's chisel. You just need to expand the menu where the mason chisels is and unselect it. That's it. Now, reforging all of these forks and useless tools or scraps gives you iron chunks, which can be used to make, like in this example, iron rods or half rods or quarter rods, which are used as the primary resource for crafting tools and items. And to hit level 3, I actually went with the forge heading tool. This was by far the most efficient item to craft. And while looking for the next item to craft, I came across this fantastic guide prepared by Dungeon Master on Steam. So I just wanted to give him a shout out as this was immensely helpful when I continued on the journey. If by any chance you're actually seeing this video, I just want to say you're a legend and I really appreciate it. Now, your go-to item for level 4 are forging fine forks. So we're back to forks again, guys, this time only higher quality forks. And the process was exactly the same. I'm not showing you all the back and forths I did between the warehouse or various different car wrecks, which are a great source of raw materials. But I can only say that it took me a lot of trips back and forth to source enough raw materials to craft all of these things. And maybe just to add what I mean by car wrecks, if you dismantle car wrecks using your welding skill, they tend to drop lots and lots of different iron, steel, and electronic items. So if you don't have a warehouse anywhere nearby, you can take advantage of car wrecks, or alternatively, you can again use welding to dismantle, like home appliances or toilets, showers. All of these things tend to give iron pipes and various different things. Now, pushing to level 5, you want to go with sheep shears, as they tend to give the highest amount of XP. I actually went for anything that I was able to craft, so belt buckles, whatever. I pushed to level 5 because for me level 5 was my primary target. For a very simple reason, I wanted to be able to craft jar lids because jars are a very useful method of preserving food. And I will make a completely separate video on food preservation. So yeah, that was my goal, to hit level 5. And now we need to pause for a moment to talk about recipes, because they differ a little bit in metalworking as compared to other skills. Normally, you would find magazines, predefined magazines with a set of predefined recipes. Now, it's not the case for metalworking. Well, not exactly the case. You see, you do have a set of magazines that teach your character certain crafts, but you also get what's called a tools schematic. And these tend to be, well, random. You can have a single tool schematic, like in these examples, or you can have a tool schematic that has up to 5 different recipes. So as mentioned earlier, to an over-engineered system of raw materials for crafting, now we are adding random recipes like Pokemons. Gotta catch 'em all. So whoever came up with this mechanic, I mean, they must have done it on purpose. I see no other way. This must have been done on purpose. So once I've hit level 5, it actually turned out that jar lids are one of the most efficient items to craft, and I wanted to make a surplus. So I started to push further and further, and I figured I'm gonna push this metalworking skill all the way. I invested so much time and effort that I don't want to stop halfway. So yeah, we're pushing through level 6, making jar lids. And after another trip to the warehouse where I was specifically looking for iron or steel ingots, which will be needed for the next item to craft, which is the axe head, I went back to the workshop to use a hacksaw and saw these iron and steel ingots into iron blocks, which will be turned into axe heads. Now these blocks need to be taken to the forge and pierced using a metalworking punch before they can actually be shaped into an axe head. And yes, you guessed it right, every single task you're doing requires fuel. So the amount of charcoal that's being burned by these furnaces and these forges is just insane. And at this point, I don't know when and how, but my character somehow got hurt in the neck, and I barely noticed it and almost died in the end. But yeah, I've hit level 7, let's go. Now any item that comes out of your forge will not be sharp, so if you're making swords or axes or whatever, you will need to use the grindstone to sharpen it and to actually, turn it into an efficient weapon. That's why the grindstone is there in the first place. Now sharpening these items gives you maintenance XP, which is always nice. And at this point, guys, I'm gonna be honest, my character almost died by doing these things. I've already burned up over 200 items of charcoal, and I figured, yeah, I think I'm done. So I did not push all the way to level 10. But I just wanted to quickly give you the idea of what are the next steps. So when you're level 7, your go-to item would be the pickaxe head. Then level 8 would be followed by a wood axe head. And your final item to craft would be the doorknob. Now these give you the quickest possible way of hitting level 10. Now already at level 8, you open up pretty much everything which is cool using metalworking, stuff like armor or all kinds of different weapons. But if you want to make that final push, this is your recipe. Now before we close off this video, I want to give a massive shout out one more time to Dungeon Master at Steam. His guide was insanely useful for me in the later stages of preparing this video. And just a quick heads up on what's coming up next on the channel. I'll be dropping tutorials related to farming, animals, and food preservation. And finally, a massive thank you to each and every one of you who watches and interacts with my content. I hope you find it useful. If so, let me know by leaving a like or dropping a comment. If you want more, don't forget to subscribe. That's it for now. I'm Gertrix. Cheers, guys.